Alright guys, what we're going to do is we're going to go through, we're going to break down this video that's put out by, we're going to try and pronounce this, SHOHEI. I'm sorry dude, I'm mispronouncing it. I love your videos, but I'm mispronouncing your name. He's a Japanese guy that has been, or Japanese born, lives in America, that was reacting to a lot of the Assassin's Creed stuff. He's actually sat down having a conversation with a Ubisoft dev. Now, there's a couple of reasons why we're doing this video. The one is that I want to go through and probably give a little bit more context to what the dev's actually talking about, maybe explain things a little better with my limited knowledge. But two, also, I'm curious to see if the devs actually knows what he's talking about and if he's legit, because you do get some people that just do lie about some stuff. So let's go through, we'll break it all down, I'll explain it the best I can and give you guys a sort of insight to my very limited version of game knowledge. As you guys may be aware, I am making a video game. It is on my other channel, Mythic Earth. I will put a link in the description below. You actually do get to see us design the game. So let's go through and let's see what he's talking about.
Insight into the destroyed shrine situation as a developer. In video games, objects are typically called props.
Right, yes. They are called props once they are brought into the game. When they're in the actual editing program, they are generally called meshes. A mesh is basically a bunch of items that are put together with textures and stuff like that. I'm actually building up Unreal, I'll show you, and that will generally make the prop. Now, you can go through, for example, and have it so that your props are single or multiple meshes all put in together. If you can instance them, or you put them as an instance. But yeah, I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. Right, so here we are in the editor itself in Unreal Engine. This is the game level, this is my test level. What he's actually talking about here is if you go into AI, weapons, then for example, go to blueprints, for example, not blueprints, sorry, meshes. Meshes, for example, we'll do the flintlock pistol, and you do the flintlock pistol, right? This here is, hang on, let's drop this back down to 0. Is the actual mesh, right? That's the prop. What that is a mesh, which is the flintlock pistol, and then it has the material here, which if you go into the material then has like that's the normal map there, that is the diffuse and the rough and the metallic, and that is your base level there. And those three combined go through and make the material, which allows you to color your pistol and give you the textures for it. So like for example, what he's talking about here was with this, right? For example, that bench there, that would be a mesh, right? With the texture put onto it, the lights and stuff like that is a mesh with textures, so that there would be a prop. This bench here would most likely be a prop. The mirror and stuff there would probably be more props. So this here, you're probably looking at one for the light is one prop. The mirror is probably another prop. The bench here is probably a third. And then they've got all the bowls and stuff like that on it as well, which is probably a whole bunch of more props. There's probably about 10 props. Obviously, this light here is the same as that, just put into two different spots. So that's one prop, and then the rest here. So you're probably looking at about 10 props in this level.
This shrine with the mirror consists of one or multiple props set together. By default, all props are static or non-destructible.
Yes.
Because making them destructible requires extra work. You have to...
Not only does it require extra work, but it also requires extra resources. Because when you destroy something, you have to simulate physics on that item that you have destroyed. That takes up processor, stuff like that. So at the end of the day, not only is it just, for example, going through and doing the destructible sets, but it's also the fact that you have to go through and also simulate physics and stuff like that. And that's where it starts getting a little bit more intensive when it comes to the actual simulation is very graphics or CPU heavy.
to create sound and visual effects for the moment it breaks, along with
Yeah, exactly right too. So for example, if we go back into Unreal Engine here, for example, if I go into this, right, this is, oops, did I just close Unreal? I did. Hang on, Unreal Epic Launcher, library, AI. So what he's talking about there, for example, is that when you slash something, when it hits, you have to put in the sound effect. So like when I bang the desk, that's a sound effect that has to be added to the actual game engine, right? So for example, I can actually do this in real time. So for example, we'll go into AI, go into I could no, I don't have it on here. Animations. So sword slash, for example, right? So there, when he sort of like hits an object, right? What you would do is you'd simply like go through, notify, play sound, and then you simply go over here and you can do that, for example. And then if I go through and hit play. Right, so that's the sound, right? Obviously it's not the right sound, but, and what you do is you go through and you line it up. Now obviously at the end of the day you want something a little bit more ballsy than that. You go through so that would be an idea, right? So for example, I'm not sure if you can hear this actually. Right, so I've gone through and I've changed the audio track so you can actually hear it now. So if we go through and we hit play, right, so that would go through and play the sound effect. So if you wanted something a little less, you know, like for example, I don't do thunder, but you got a whole bunch of like choices here, right? So you'd make it and you just, and then if you wanted to, you can also adjust it. And for example, so then that's you adding the slash sound effects to your sword. Let's go back to the video.
Specific animations.
But those sound effects all have to be recorded, added to the game, imported, which is not a real big thing. But then you have to go through and edit every animation. So like for example, that was me just simply adding it to the slash animation. Like for example, your death animations, you might have 5 or 6 different death montages or death animations that you need to add sound effects to. So,
etc. It's an extra costly process. Usually in games, destructible objects are limited to those more likely to be in the player's path, like a lamppost in GTA that you can destroy by hitting it. The first mistake was even considering these shrine items as something cool to break.
So that's the things. In other Assassin's Creed games, you really can't break religious object in the map. Like you can break the cross, right? But in case you don't know, the mirror is the most important things in the shrine. And usually the mirror is hidden to like a core of the shrine. But if you do some ritual or something, the mirror goes outside sometimes, but it's very rare.
Doing so encourages players to fight inside shrines. I also noticed that many enemies are placed inside Japanese.
So that's the thing, that's the big thing, right? Is at the end of the day is that they've had to go through and actually program these shrines to be breakable. And that's where he's sort of like he's hinting at, he's saying like this takes time, this is effort, this is things that you've actually had to program. Why would you go through and program something like this unless you wanted someone to break those objects?
Gardens or on the exteriors of temples. The second mistake was failing to correct this during the backlash phase when they claimed they would be more careful in respecting Japanese culture. Transforming a destructible prop into a non-destructible one is just a click or two on a developer's computer. This means they had not considered, even for a second, how religiously significant this item actually is. I don't think people like you should call them evil.
Did I?
They are just very...
I don't think he did, but...
ignorant, not well educated on the subject, and not thorough enough in their work.
Actually, I thought about it too. But seeing Half-Life Shrine, which is kind of parody of nuclear.
So this is the Torii Gate here. This is the Torii Gate from Nagasaki that was destroyed during the atomic bomb dropping. And here you have religious figures jumping or bouncing off the Torii Gate. You have the assassins, bouncing and jumping off the Torii Gate. Now, if that's okay, fine. But they should be able to bounce and jump off every statue. So the people that are not upset about this, my question would be, if I was to put in the game that you can bounce and jump off the George Floyd statue, would you be upset?
Torii Gate, I think many Japanese felt insulted seeing that lack of the research that they.
I imagine if you bounced off a Torii Gate in real life, they would probably stone you still. Joking, but you get the idea.
did in past works feels we are insulted. Like we are not.
Ubisoft team is doing everything they can.
They're gonna explain why that happened.
I'm sure the Ubisoft team is doing everything they can to avoid further backlash at this point, so this issue either didn't cross their minds or they changed it in the final game, but not in this preview version, which was likely made around December.
I really hope they disabled the breaking the shrine mirror because it's very important.
For example, fixing the extremely tall and unrealistic Sakura trees is probably too late now. I'm sure they were aware they
not really. You could just scale them, but yeah.
were too big. But sometimes in games, developers decide it's less realistic, but it looks cool.
Yeah.
In this case, it was a major mistake on their part because they are trying to build a realistic weather and landscape simulation. I'm pretty sure they made the Sakura trees oversized on purpose, so they would be visible from a long distance.
Yeah, that makes sense. That explains why Sakura tree is so extremely big.
However, their mistake was underestimating how important Sakura is in Japanese culture, where everyone knows their details very well.
So having these interviews, I started to think there's a good people in Ubisoft. So it looks like
not all game devs are bad, and it's and most of your game devs are pretty decent fellas. These sort of decisions are made more by the upper management.
person I interviewed.
But the problem is that your game devs, if they do know better, generally won't speak up because they're afraid that they're going to get fired.
They really understand what Japanese think. And I asked the question. The question I asked is, what made you decide to talk to me about this controversy?
Internally at Ubisoft, just before Christmas, we received a worldwide communication regarding the controversy surrounding the game. In an effort to reassure us, they stated that they had analyzed all the complaints online.
It is important that we don't get discouraged by this noise. We have taken the time to analyze this situation. They represent a small yet vocal minority, and it is important to differentiate between the haters and those who provide constructive feedback.
I wonder where my first video went. Hater.
I generally have a problem when studios say stuff like this. Like, they're trying to downplay the amount of backlash that they are getting. And it's like, well, you know, like at the end of the day, your game hasn't come out yet. You're trying to downplay it already. What happens if the game fails? Now, that said, I still think Assassin's Creed will probably sell anywhere from 3 to 5 million copies. But they need about 10 to make this game successful, or to be really successful. Between 5 to 10. So, I don't think it's going to get that.
Or constructive
feedback. Not working on this project myself, I still wonder what they consider constructive feedback and how they address it. So I was not reassured as they had hoped.
No.
We were instructed not to comment on these attacks and to ignore them. From the outside,
that's another leaks stated too, right? Because I
Yasuke being African and his origins, and the only issue they acknowledged from the community was Yasuke being African and his origins in Japan. They did not communicate to us, their worldwide employees, any specific mistakes in game design, story, or the portrayal of Japanese culture. However, they did state in both internal and external communications that they were working to improve as many inaccuracies in the Japanese setting as possible. For example, the shapes of tatami mats.
A little sad not to see square tatami mat.
Yet, they were very vague and did not clearly explain why addressing these inaccuracies had suddenly become so important before release. Around the same time, reports surfaced online stating that the first delay of the game was partly to address historical accuracy. Meanwhile, a respected leaker claimed that some of Yasuke's story and how he's portrayed in the game is being altered.
Yeah, so it's because for the marketing in Japan, they literally said like historically accurate, and then they care about historical accuracy. And seeing a lot of inaccuracy as a Japanese feels insult or like looking down on or really ignored. Like it feels like oh, it's like a just Japanese culture. Like,
so I've said this in the previous cuts that I had to cut because I, for example, was doing an update for Unreal, blah, blah, blah. I want to sort of try and get him to help me make my Japanese section of the game. I'll probably reach out to him when we get closer to the date, but I want him to come in and work with us on how to actually go through, and even if it's just like sending him a bunch of concepts and stuff. But I want to sort of get someone that's actually Japanese and knows about history to come in and to be there. Because there is a scene in the intro with actually there's two scenes in the... No, one scene in there with a Japanese assassin in the intro sequence. And I want to make sure that we do it right.
just like a samurai.
By the way, indie dev doing that. Not a AAA game studio.
Cherry Blossom done. That's what we felt.
I don't have precise information about this, but it was clear they were concealing major mistakes in Yasuke's storyline, which led to re-recording some audio lines and editing certain cinematics.
It's definitely whether Yasuke was a samurai or not. Because in the beginning, even in Wikipedia, Yasuke was a samurai, right? But now, after this controversy, there's a lot of Japanese real historians started saying there's almost impossible to call Yasuke samurai at a time. I'm not gonna talk about this. Just Google it if you doubt.
So again, my main concern was that the debate seemed to focus primarily on whether Yasuke was technically a samurai in title or simply a legendary warrior. This seemed like a very minor detail compared to the broader complaints circulating online.
So next question I did is, how do you personally see this controversy?
I personally feel really uncomfortable and ashamed to work for a company that allowed such a debacle to happen. I truly regret the lack of serious preparation in depicting the Japanese setting and the failure to recognize content that could lead to cultural incidents. The fact that they secretly hid and fixed the worst mistakes before release, without taking responsibility or admitting their errors, feels like the worst part to me. I'll conclude my answer with a prime example of why Ubisoft completely deserves the backlash. Assassin's Creed Shadows censored in Japan to remove beheadings and limb amputation. The late-stage censorship of certain aspects of the game, such as dismemberment, in the Japanese version further reinforces my belief that Ubisoft did not take the necessary steps to anticipate such issues. I have experience with CERO's gain rating process, and so does Ubisoft. We are supposed to work with them during a milestone called the age rating phase, which takes place around the time the game enters its beta stage. For Assassin's Creed Shadows, this should have happened at least 6 to 8 months ago. The fact that this level of violence passed CERO's checks at that stage suggests that Ubisoft either failed to provide enough examples and data for a proper analysis or made last-minute design changes. While many other games are allowed to depict dismemberment in Japan, I'm fairly confident that CERO's restrictions mainly apply to extreme violence against innocent or defenseless individuals, such as priests or civilian women. This is a well-known fact in the industry, and Ubisoft should have anticipated this issue months ago.
That's something I never looked at it, but also started concerning what's going on about level 1 unarmed weapon.
And this is always the thing, right? Is at the end of the day, is that they, in previous Assassin's Creed, if you went through and you killed too many people, my understanding was you became desynced. So it does make you wonder, like the amount of violence that is against the Japanese people, considering like we have previous versions of Assassin's Creed. We know the template for Assassin's Creed. They don't normally do this sort of massive dismemberment, but for some reason, these Japanese versions, they are. My question is why? Why are you all of a sudden doing this? Is this a thing where, like, for example, the Unreal Engine or whatever engine you're using, maybe Unity, has gone through and has made it easier or less intensive? But then once again, we're talking about physics here. When you dismember a body, you have to simulate physics on all those parts. This is what I was working with. You'll see on one of the videos that was put up on my other channel. We're talking about skeletons and the skeletons falling apart and disengaging and just falling into pieces once they get killed. But the problem we were having is that there was like 20 bones in there, and that was just causing a mass amounts when it comes to simulation, which caused it to jitter a little bit.
Woman and no penalty to discuss internally. Have there been any conversation about Japanese reactions? Because I really want to know if they care about Japanese people.
I think most employees are quite uncomfortable giving their personal opinions on Ubisoft's version of Vyasuk, even during a coffee break in the office. They are afraid of being accused of racism in this very DEI-driven society. Also, we have been seeing the Ubisoft backlash online for years now.
Wait, that's really toxic environment, and I'm sure it's happening.
That's what we call a positive toxic positivity toxic. I think it's positive toxicity. Basically, where in the game, in the studio, for example, you can't comment on something because if you do, other people might think that you're a racist or blah blah blah. And basically what that causes is it causes this office to have this overly positive opinion on everything, even though there might actually be issues.
Happening pretty much anywhere.
So it's hard for most of us to really focus on just one case within this whole series of backlashes. This is basically the reason I wanted to talk to you and help your opinion get the support I felt it deserved. As developers, we are under NDA and cannot give our personal opinions about our own games publicly online.
I mean, my opinion is that, to be honest, okay, I do understand now that developer is also suffering about environment, but to company, so I lack trust in Ubisoft. Why do you think people have such a tendency to lack trust in Ubisoft?
I personally see this recent controversy surrounding Ubisoft as having two very distinct origins. The first is the overall decline in the quality and polish of Ubisoft's games over the last decade. Apart from a few exceptions, you can objectively see this through Metacritic scores, as well as general community feedback online and often sales numbers. Some older fans of Ubisoft titles no longer feel that the new games are as creative and enjoyable as they used to be. There is a well-documented case of Ubisoft fatigue that many players suffer from, so older fans feel hurt and miss the good old days.
It's interesting because at the end of the day, the biggest movie or the biggest game that people still to this day think is the best is Black Flag. If you ask anyone that's played Assassin's Creed, you ask them which game is the best game that Ubisoft made for Assassin's Creed series, it's probably Black Flag. There's been several games that have come out since then, but it's always, which is, by the way, the game they're remastering too.
In some cases, the hate comes from past love. Many players today grew up playing Ubisoft games and loved them as kids. This sentiment is also shared by many employees, and I'll try to explain why. In the last decade, while I was an employee at Ubisoft myself, I saw many colleagues lose a significant part of their motivation. Furthermore, Ubisoft has an increasingly concerning turnover rate. Senior and talented developers are leaving for other companies and being replaced by less experienced employees. Very recently, the producer of AC Shadows himself revealed that half his team has never released a game before.
So that is something that we have heard. Now, the big key there is they've never released a game themselves. I'm wondering if they're talking about the actual, for example, they've actually gone through and done their own game, or if they've actually worked on a game that released. I'm not sure about that.
So another leak is saying the same thing. Really lose game
Impact on the quality of the
trailer. You can see it.
As you can imagine, this has a serious impact on the quality of the games. Now, I'll detail more about why people are becoming demotivated or leaving Ubisoft. For profitability reasons, AAA game companies will ask developers to work on the same kind of projects repeatedly. They'd focus on specializing their workforce as much as possible. For example, if you were a programmer in charge of enemy behavior, you would be asked to do that for the rest of your career. Within Ubisoft, if you worked on a franchise like Far Cry or Assassin's Creed, management would do everything possible to keep you on those franchises for as long as possible to improve production efficiency using safe pipelines. To make things worse, Ubisoft has become well known for repeating formulas and rarely trying to reinvent the wheel. You could even be asked to create a simpler version of enemy behavior for the next project, possibly because the person who originally coded AEI no longer works there. I believe this phenomenon also creates fatigue among developers, leading to a lack of motivation, which can eventually result in burnout or even depression. Many colleagues I know, including myself, dream of returning to smaller and more creative projects. Unfortunately, that rarely happens at Ubisoft. So, I truly believe the current Assassin's Creed team is weaker and less experienced than it was during the series' golden age, such as with Black Flag.
That's interesting because that's the one that people will generally sit there and claim is the best, is Black Flag.
So they changed company. I believe don't care to
Where many team
decisions.
This makes it more likely for them to make mistakes in an environment where many team members have never worked together before. The second point of controversy is the political and very unclear messaging Ubisoft conveys through its games. This started around 2018, when many spokespersons for Ubisoft games insisted in interviews that their games were not political. However, most game settings and stories used past or current political and social trends, such as the war on drugs, revolutions, societal collapse, and corruption. Many journalists concluded that Ubisoft was cowardly using politics in a superficial way, just enough to generate sales and interest by giving the impression that their games had deeper meaning, but without truly committing to serious analysis or deeper messages. All these titles had shallow and superficial plots, and concerns about writing quality have been growing for over a decade. I think it's safe to say that the majority of lower-level employees at the time agreed with this, and so did I. In the past, Ubisoft was known for deeper stories and stronger messages in games like Beyond Good and Evil, Valiant Hearts, or Splinter Cell, or at the very least for fun and lighthearted tones in games like Rayman or Rabbids. Then, a few years later, the woke/inclusivity debate started online, fueled by movie and video game franchises that underwent abrupt changes in tone and vision, which felt forced to some fans. This felt even more forced from Ubisoft because, around the same time, the Me Too movement triggered a wave of employees speaking out about their experiences with mental or sexual harassment.
So that was really the turning point for the Ubisoft.
This reckoning quickly snowballed into a situation where most Ubisoft studios had one or multiple proven cases of harassment. As you can imagine, public and internal opinion of the company became even worse. My personal take is that high-level management insisted on pushing as much DEI content in games as possible to force a positive shift in Ubisoft's image and redeem themselves for having protected perpetrators of harassment. Most players perceived this as an insincere and reactionary push for inclusivity. Acknowledging this doesn't make someone racist, by the way. Now, with all this context explained, I think it's easy to see why the Shadows controversy became such a big deal online, and with good reason.
So for now, that's all.
So that's interesting. So he seems to be on the side of the YouTubers, which is probably why they've changed the voice. Look, at the end of the day, it's interesting. It doesn't really change my opinion on what was happening in Ubisoft. It kind of reinforces it. I was very concerned that that Ubisoft's devs are sitting there trying to make a game, and it sounds like a lot of management are the ones that are sort of sitting there going through and forcing a lot of this stuff to happen. And it's sort of the management that's calling the shots that's causing a lot of this. The devs are just the ones that are sort of crossfire or stuck in the crossfire, because they've got the management saying one thing or do one thing, they've got the fans saying they want to do something else, and the devs are sort of agreeing with the fans, but they also need to work and make the paycheck. So, you know, they're sort of sitting there going, well, hang on, like, I need the money, I need a job, but I don't necessarily agree with the direction. That's what I'm sort of taking away from this. I think this dev is legit. I really do. And it's interesting. But guys, let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Obviously, I will put a link in the description below to the YouTube channel for Mythic Earth. I think we have like 3 subscribers on it. We don't really advertise it. But I will put a link in the description below. It's actually where you get to see me do a lot of the game dev stuff. I'm trying to actually go through and put a lot of it up to there and get it off this channel. But yeah, guys, obviously you get to see me making a video game in my spare time. Apart from that, guys, let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. This video has been helpful. Please smack that like button. If you're new to the channel, welcome and subscribe. Apart from that, guys, please also do go and follow Shohen. I'm mispronouncing his name. He is a really, really good YouTuber when it comes to breaking down Japanese culture and stuff. He's very interesting, and like I said, I want to reach out to him and get him to get me advice or even correspond with us when it comes to the Japanese setting, because we do actually have a Japanese assassin in our game, and I want to make sure we actually do it justice when it comes to the Japan. And like I say, it's interesting that like me as an indie dev will do that, but it doesn't seem like, for example, that massive AAA studio is willingly to do that, which is very, very interesting. But guys, let me know your thoughts out in that comment section below. Apart from that, guys, the video has been helpful. Please smack that like button. If you're new to the channel, welcome and subscribe. Apart from that, guys, we'll see you in the next demonetized video from YouTube.